The sun hung low over Tall City, casting long shadows on the dusty streets. The town had seen better days. The dust of a once thriving mining community clung to every surface, mixing with the bittersweet scent of whiskey and despair that hung in the air. Among the weathered buildings stood a modest saloon with a swinging door that creaked like an old man's bones. Frank Dubois was a relic of a time long gone, seated at the bar nursing a glass of sour mash. His lanky figure was draped in a threadbare duster, every wrinkle in his sun-cured skin telling a story that nobody else cared to hear. Once a respected sheriff, Frank now blended into the background like a shadow, the lines etched into his forehead speaking volumes of lost battles both outside and within. On this particular evening, the atmosphere crackled with tension, the kind that suffocated conversation and brewed trouble. A newcomer had come to town, a slick gambler known as Lyle Carson, whose reputation for playing loose with the rules preceded him. He had settled into a corner booth, and a small gathering had formed around him, drawn in by the lure of easy money and dangerous charm. As Frank glanced over at the gambler, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was the way Carson's eyes darted around the room, calculating and cold. He was the type to pull a switchblade before a handshake, and Frank had encountered men like him before. A loud crash of laughter erupted from Carson's table, which made Frank's stomach churn. He downed the last sip of his whiskey and stood up, instinctively straightening his coat as he made his way toward the gambler. The air felt electric, thick with the scent of ambition and treachery. Frank knew he was stepping into a game that could end with someone bleeding out on the dirty floor. "Carson," Frank called out, his voice steady though his heart raced. "Mind if I join you?" The gambler turned, his thin lips curling into a smirk. "Well, if it isn't the town's watchdog, what you come to sniff around for? Lost your bone?" Frank fought to keep his temper in check. "I know you've been dealing more than just cards, Lyle. This town's been through hell, and I won't let you play it like your own personal poker chip." Carson leaned back, brushing off the insult like dust from his clothes. "Oh, Frank, you're as predictable as a sunset, just doing what I do best, showing folks a good time." "Your idea of a good time usually involves a quick exit through the back alleys." Frank didn't miss the glint of steel tucked into Carson's jacket, a dealer's ace in a world where everyone could end up dead. "You'll learn soon enough that in Tall City, the stakes are higher than you realize," Carson replied, his smile unnervingly sharp. At that moment, a rush of patrons burst through the saloon doors, and the room fell silent. The new arrivals were rough-looking men, all bearing the insignia of a local mining company. They fanned out, hostility radiating from them like heat from the sun. "Where's that cheating bastard?" one of them bellowed, his voice like thunder. Frank recognized him as Hank Granger, a foreman with a reputation for settling scores in blood. "Guess the party's started," Carson said with a sinister glee that turned Frank's stomach. Frank felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him like the parched heat of the desert sun. He had a choice: step back and let the chaos ensue, or confront it head-on. Gathering his resolve, he stepped forward, determination etched into his features. The game was about to take a deadly turn, and he meant to see it through. "Hold it right there!" Frank shouted, raising his hands to signal the oncoming storm. The tension surged as every eye in the saloon turned to him. "There's no need for violence. Let's talk this out like civilized folks." Hank Granger's eyes narrowed. "Talk? About what, old man? This rat's been stealing from our pockets, and we're not leaving until he pays." Carson's smirk faltered, but only for a flicker of a second. "You've got it all wrong, Granger. Your men just don't know how to play the game." Frank took a steadying breath. "I say we settle this with a game, just like the one you're accustomed to, Lyle. If you win, you walk away free and clear, but if you lose, you give up whatever it is you've taken from the miners." Laughter erupted from the miners' table. "You think we're gonna let this crooked son of a—" "Shut it," Frank interrupted, his voice strong and uncompromising. "You trust me to be fair, and if Carson doesn't play by the rules, it's my neck too." Granger considered Frank's proposal, rubbing his chin with a calloused hand. "Fine, you'll be the dealer, old man, but if he pulls any fast ones, it's on you." Taking a deep breath, Frank led the group to one of the back tables, a haze of uncertainty hanging over them. The tension crackled in the air as Frank spread out the deck. expertly shuffling the cards. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The stakes were high. The first hand was quick, and Frank avoided the emotional turmoil that could shatter any rational thinking. Carson lost, his face betraying a flicker of irritation as he dropped the first round. Frank could sense the desperation creeping in, and he pressed on through the next hands with unwavering concentration. Slow and steady, keeping it clean. As they dealt and played, Frank noticed the shifts in Carson's demeanor. The gambler was growing agitated, sweat gathering at his brow. With each defeated round, the glint of a threat loomed larger over him. Granger and his men leaned in, eyes gleaming with malice and eagerness as they eyed their prize. "Last hand," Frank said, the air thick with suspense. "Winner takes all." With hands trembling in a deadly rhythm, they each drew their final cards. Frank focused, keeping his poker face impenetrable, while he felt the weight of every man in the room and the beating of the drum in his chest. As they revealed their hands, the room collectively held its breath. Carson's face fell, realizing he had underestimated Frank's skill. The cards on the table were clear. Frank held the winning hand. The saloon erupted into roars of disbelief. "Cheat!" Carson shouted, scrambling to his feet. "There's no way you—" "Shut up!" Granger's voice boomed, silencing the uproar. "You lost fair and square, Carson. Now it's time to honor your debt." Carson's face darkened, and in that moment, something cracked wide open. Frank sprang to block any escape route as the gambler reached for his concealed weapon. The instincts of a former sheriff kicked in, and in one fluid motion, he yanked out his own revolver, trained steadily on Carson. "Drop it," Frank demanded. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Time splintered into seconds as Carson weighed his options, the fight slowly draining from him. The saloon fell into an eerie silence, every pair of eyes watching the showdown. Finally, with a defiant glare, Carson dropped the weapon onto the table. "This isn't over, old man," he hissed, but the edge of threat in his voice had dulled. Frank gestured to Granger and his men. "Take him out of here, and don't let him come back. Tell him Tall City has no place for snakes." As the dust settled and the miners dragged Carson away, Frank felt the weight lift from his shoulders, though his heart still raced. He had managed to confront the dark tendrils of corruption that threatened Tall City, at least for today. With the saloon quiet again, Frank returned to the bar, poured himself another whiskey, and downed it in one swift motion. The game was far from over, he knew that well. But for now, one more piece of filth had been swept off the street, and for the first time in a long while, Tall City breathed a bit easier.